A woman shouts, "Go back to where you belong," at the black maid, thinking she's just speaking her mind. But she has no idea that the woman she's humiliating is actually the billionaire's secret lover. In that single moment, a garden party turns into a storm of scandal, whispers, and unspoken truths. As social media explodes, every glance, every gesture is magnified, and one simple act of cruelty sparks a chain reaction no one could have predicted. Hidden photos, power struggles, and family secrets collide, threatening careers, relationships, and the very heart of a community. Will the truth set them free, or will it tear everything apart in the most shocking betrayal of trust? Through the late afternoon haze, Emma Whitcomb surveyed her family's garden party with the practiced eye of someone who had attended hundreds of such events. The string lights weren't lit yet, but they hung ready for dusk, swaying gently in the warm breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass and expensive perfume. Everything had to be perfect for the charity preview. The flowers arranged in elegant bouquets of whites and pinks, the gourmet food displayed on polished silver platters, the faces of Hartford's elite mingling among the perfectly manicured paths that wound through the expansive Whitcomb estate gardens. "Divine party, darling," cooed Margaret Ashworth, lifting her champagne glass so that the fading sunlight caught the bubbles. Her diamond bracelet clinked against the crystal stem. "Though I must say, the help seems different this year. Not quite what we're used to, are they?" Emma's laugh tinkled like ice in crystal, practiced and controlled. "One makes do," she said, adjusting her silk scarf with manicured fingers that betrayed the slightest tremor. Her eyes darted around the garden, checking for any sign of imperfection that might mar the Whitcomb reputation that her family had spent generations building. The fountain needed to bubble just right, the flowers had to be fresh, the servers needed to be practically invisible, yet always available. Across the lawn, Clara Brooks moved with quiet efficiency at the dessert table, her hands steady as she arranged delicate pastries on silver trays. Her movements were precise, thoughtful, each petite four and chocolate truffle placed with intention. The crisp white tablecloth caught her attention. Pure linen, she noted, not the synthetic blend some houses use to cut corners. She straightened a napkin, adjusting it to perfect symmetry. The citrus punch gleamed in cut crystal bowls, catching the golden late-afternoon light, and the familiar symphony of clinking china filled the air as guests helped themselves to petit fours and tiny eclairs. "I heard the usual service company went under." Another socialite chimed in, swirling her drink and leaning in conspiratorially. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper that carried further than normal speech. "Such a shame. You never know what you'll get with new help these days. Standards just aren't what they used to be." The comment landed wrong in Emma's already anxious mind, stirring something uncomfortable in her chest. All afternoon, she'd been on edge, watching every interaction, every raised eyebrow, every whispered conversation behind napkins and fans, the weight of maintaining appearances pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak of expectation, suffocating her with its demands. "Did you see how she arranged those trays?" Someone tittered from a nearby cluster of women in pastel sundresses. "So, different. Not like Matthews used to do it at all. Do you think she even knows which fork goes where?" Emma felt her control slipping as the whispers reached her ears. The carefully maintained facade cracked as weeks of stress suddenly found their target. The pressure of the charity board's expectations, her mother's scrutiny, and her own insecurities converged into a single hot point of frustration. Without thinking, she turned toward Clara, her voice cutting through the gentle garden chatter like a knife through silk. "Go back to where you belong." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, acrid and impossible to ignore. Conversation stopped abruptly, replaced by shocked inhales and uncomfortable coughs. Glasses froze halfway to lips, suspended in mid-air. In the sudden silence, even the birds seemed to pause their evening songs, as if nature itself was holding its breath at the outburst. Clara's hands stilled over the tray she'd been adjusting, a delicate chocolate-dipped strawberry caught between her fingers. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, her spine straight as a ruler, her expression composed despite the public humiliation. Then, with deliberate care, she placed the strawberry precisely where it belonged and set down the silver tongs she'd been holding. Her movements were measured, dignified, as she stepped away from the table, wiping her hands on the small apron tied around her waist. Some guests nervously laughed, their tittering mixing with the splash of the garden fountain that suddenly seemed too loud in the awkward quiet. Others shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding great interest in their shoes or the nearby rose bushes with their perfect blooms. A few shot disapproving looks in Emma's direction, their eyebrows raised in silent judgment of such a public display of poor manners. For a brief moment, Emma felt triumphant. She'd taken control, hadn't she? Shown everyone who was in charge of this garden, this party, this world they all inhabited. But as Clara walked across the lawn, her steps unhurried and her head held high, despite the weight of every stare following her progress, something unexpected happened inside Emma. The satisfaction in Emma's chest began to curdle, turning sour and heavy like milk left too long in summer heat. She watched Clara's retreating figure, the woman's dignity in the face of public humiliation somehow making Emma feel smaller with each step that carried Clara away from the party. The woman hadn't stumbled, hadn't cried, hadn't even looked back, and somehow that composed exit stung more than any retort could have. The automatic garden lights began to blink on one by one, casting long shadows across the perfectly trimmed grass and illuminating faces that now seemed less friendly, more assessing. Emma stood rooted to her spot, the weight of what she'd done settling over her like an unwelcome blanket, heavy and impossible to shrug off. The string lights above came to life, twinkling against the darkening sky in cheerful patterns that seemed to mock the hollow feeling growing in her chest where satisfaction had been moments before. Guests resumed their conversations, voices a bit too bright, laughter a touch too loud, but the easy flow of the afternoon was gone, replaced by something strained and artificial. Emma felt the change in the air, saw it in the quick glances thrown her way when people thought she wasn't looking, heard it in the suddenly more formal tones used to address her. As Clara disappeared around the corner of the house, Emma was left holding her champagne glass, its contents now warm and flat against her lips, while an unfamiliar sensation of shame crept up her spine like ivy on a garden wall. The gentle tinkling of ice in glasses and forced laughter couldn't mask the ugliness of what had just transpired among the beauty of the garden. The perfect garden party she'd worked so hard to maintain had transformed into something else entirely, a moment that would be whispered about at other gatherings for weeks to come. And for the first time that evening, Emma questioned whether she was really in control at all, or just another perfectly arranged ornament in someone else's garden. Emma stared at her untouched breakfast, the morning sun streaming through the bay windows of the breakfast room. Her phone buzzed again, the 15th time since she'd woken up. The perfectly poached eggs grew cold as another text lit up her screen. "Did you really say that?" read the message from her college friend Sophie. Emma set the phone face down on the white tablecloth, but it buzzed again immediately. The household staff moved quietly around her, their usual morning chatter noticeably absent. Even Mrs. Peterson, who'd served the Whitcombs for 20 years, seemed to avoid eye contact as she refreshed Emma's coffee. "Darling." Her father's voice came from the doorway. Charles Whitcomb III stood there in his pressed suit, newspaper tucked under his arm. These things blow over. It was just a slip. Emma pushed her eggs around the plate. The Gardening Society chairwoman called twice already. Let them talk, he said, settling into his chair. Remember when the Hendersons' son had that incident at the country club? Nobody even mentions it anymore. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a private message on Instagram. Saw what happened at your party? Wow. Emma opened her Notes app, where she'd been drafting an apology for the past hour. Regarding yesterday's unfortunate incident at the Whitcomb Garden preview, I sincerely regret that my words may have caused offense. As a longtime supporter of our community's charitable initiatives, I believe in creating welcoming spaces for all. The stress of event planning led to a momentary lapse in judgment. Her finger hovered over the delete button. The words felt hollow, even to her. Across town at the Hale estate, Clara slipped in through the service entrance just as dawn was breaking. She made her way to the pantry, closing the heavy wooden door behind her. Leaning against the shelf of carefully labeled spices and ingredients, she took several deep breaths. Clarita. Victor's voice was soft, concerned. She hadn't heard him approach. He stood in the doorway, still in his morning robe, grey hair slightly dishevelled. The worry in his eyes made her throat tight. I'm fine, she said quickly, straightening up. Just organising the breakfast items. Victor stepped closer, placing a gentle hand at the small of her back. Mi pajarita, he whispered, using the nickname he'd given her months ago. You're here earlier than usual. Clara busied herself with the coffee beans, measuring them carefully into the grinder. I thought I'd get ahead on the day's tasks. They moved to the kitchen's small breakfast nook, where they usually shared their morning coffee before the rest of the staff arrived. Victor watched as Clara methodically set out their cups, her movements precise but tense. About yesterday's garden party, he began. The weather was lovely for it. Clara cut in, focusing intently on stirring honey into her coffee. Victor's hand covered hers briefly, stilling her stirring. She met his eyes for a moment, then looked away. Meanwhile, in his small home office, Ben Carter scrolled through his social media feed. A friend's Instagram story from the Whitcomb Garden party had caught his attention, particularly the shocked faces in the background of what seemed like a casual photo. Something went down at the Whitcomb place. His friend had messaged him. Rich people drama, but uglier than usual. Ben opened a new document on his laptop. As a local journalist, he'd covered plenty of society events, but his instincts told him this was different. He began typing notes, already seeing the potential headlines. Back at her breakfast table, Emma read her draft apology for the 20th time. The words still felt wrong, but the pressure to respond was mounting. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the Hartford Heritage Foundation board members. Just post it, her father said, not looking up from his paper. People want to see you acknowledge it, then they'll move on. Emma's thumb hovered over the share button. After another moment's hesitation, she pressed it. In the Hale estate kitchen, Clara's phone buzzed in her pocket. She waited until Victor had stepped away to take a call before pulling it out. There it was, Emma Whitcomb's carefully worded apology, already gathering comments. Clara's eyes narrowed as she read the measured phrases, noting the way Emma positioned herself as the victim of circumstance rather than the perpetrator of hurt. The words momentary lapse in judgment made her jaw clench. Online, the reaction was immediate. Comments began appearing under Emma's post. This feels a bit hollow. What exactly happened? Classic non-apology apology. The notifications kept coming, spreading across platforms as Hartford social circles woke up to the morning's drama. Emma's post had opened the floodgates, turning what might have remained a whispered story into public discourse. Clara put her phone away as Victor returned to the kitchen. He watched her with concern as she began preparing the morning's fruit plate, her knife perhaps cutting a bit more firmly than necessary through the ripe melons. Ben Carter sat at his favorite corner table in Hartford Coffee House, making final edits to his article. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the steam from his third cup of coffee and casting a warm glow over his laptop screen. He'd been working since dawn, meticulously piecing together accounts from party attendees and scanning countless social media posts, cross-referencing details to ensure accuracy while maintaining the human element of the story. The coffee shop hummed with quiet morning conversation around him. A barista called out orders, the espresso machine hissed, and the door chimed as customers came and went, but Ben remained focused, barely looking up from his screen. He adjusted his glasses and took another sip of coffee, now cooling in his mug. His cursor hovered over the Publish button. The story was straightforward enough: a society event, a shocking outburst, and its aftermath. But the detail about Victor Hale and Clara Brooks gave him pause. A neighbor had mentioned seeing them in what appeared to be an intimate moment early this morning. Victor's hand at Clara's back, speaking in hushed tones, their body language suggesting something beyond a professional relationship. "This changes everything," Ben muttered, adjusting his final paragraph. His journalistic instincts warred with his sense of responsibility. Was this relevant to the public interest, or just sensationalism? After a moment's reflection, he left the detail in but carefully worded it. He took a deep breath and clicked Publish. Within minutes, notifications began flooding his screen. The story spread through Hartford social circles like wildfire, comments pouring in faster than he could read them. Ben watched with a mixture of professional satisfaction and unease as his article took on a life of its own. At Rosemary's Cafe across town, the morning breakfast crowd gathered around their usual tables, the aroma of fresh pastries and coffee filling the cozy space. A group of regular morning customers huddled over their phones, reading Ben's article aloud, their coffee and toast momentarily forgotten. "I always knew those Whitcombs were putting on airs," said Martha Jensen, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair pinned neatly back. She adjusted her reading glasses and tapped the screen emphatically. "Remember how Emma acted during last year's fundraiser? So dismissive of the volunteers who weren't from her circle. But what about Victor Hale and that housekeeper?" whispered Rebecca Torres, leaning in so far her scarf nearly dipped into her coffee cup. Her eyes widened with excitement. "I never would have guessed. They've always seemed so proper and professional whenever I've seen them." "Well, I think it's sweet," countered Henry Blackwell, surprising the others. "Victor's been alone since Martha died 5 years ago. Everyone deserves happiness." Across town at the local library, with its tall windows and peaceful reading rooms, 3 college students huddled around a study table, sharing the article on their social media accounts, adding passionate comments about privilege and accountability. Their fingers flew across their screens, adding hashtags and commentary. "This is exactly what we talked about in social justice class," said Maya, her dark curls bouncing as she nodded emphatically. "The power dynamics at play here are so problematic." "And did you see what Emma Whitcomb said to those gardeners, after her family literally built their fortune on exploited labor?" added Zach, pushing his glasses up his nose. The hashtag #Hartford Garden Party started trending locally, soon joined by Whitcomb apology and, more troublingly, Hale housekeeper. Clara sat in the Hale Estates kitchen, a bright, spacious room with gleaming copper pots hanging above a center island. Her fingers gripped her phone tightly, the screen displaying Ben's article. Morning light spilled through the large windows overlooking the garden, where she'd spent countless hours nurturing flowers and vegetables. Her hands trembled slightly as she read. Sources report that Victor Hale, prominent local businessman and widower, was seen early this morning in what appeared to be an intimate moment with Ms. Brooks, raising questions about workplace dynamics at the estate. The pair were observed speaking closely near the garden entrance, a witness noting Mr. Hale's protective gesture and their apparent familiarity. Colour drained from her face. She'd been careful. They'd both been so careful. For months they had maintained their privacy, sharing quiet moments away from prying eyes. Now, a single paragraph threatened to expose everything. Anger and fear wrestled in her chest as she set the phone down on the marble countertop. The quiet dignity they'd maintained, suddenly vulnerable to public scrutiny and misunderstanding. The house phone rang, its shrill tone making her jump. It was Victor's private line from his study. Clara took a deep breath, composing herself before answering. "Clara, could you come up, please?" His voice sounded calm, but she detected the tension underneath. She made her way through the house, past family portraits and antique furniture that had witnessed generations of Hale family history. Each step up the grand staircase felt heavier than usual. She found him standing by his desk, his own phone in hand. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Persian rug, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. Clara noticed his shoulders were tense, his usually perfect posture slightly strained. "You've seen it?" he asked quietly, his deep voice gentle despite the circumstances. She nodded, closing the study door behind her with a soft click. "Ben Carter's article. I never thought—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words for the violation she felt. "Come here," Victor said, opening his arms. The warm mahogany of his study surrounded them like a protective cocoon. She stepped into his embrace, allowing herself a moment of comfort, breathing in his familiar scent of sandalwood and coffee before pulling back, conscious of the world that now seemed to be watching. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Her hand smoothed her apron, a habit when she was thinking. Victor ran a hand through his silver hair, the sunlight catching the distinguished streaks at his temples. "We could confirm it," he suggested, leaning against his desk. "Get ahead of the speculation. Take control of the narrative before others do it for us." Clara shook her head firmly, her dark eyes resolute. "No, not like this. Not because we're forced to. I won't have our relationship turned into gossip or worse, some kind of scandal. We deserve better than that." "Agreed," Victor said, squeezing her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in the reassuring way that had become so familiar. "We tell only those we trust completely. Martha in the kitchen already knows. She's seen how we look at each other. And James, my driver, has been discreet about our few outings. And my mother," Clara added, thinking of her proud, practical mother who had worked as a housekeeper herself for 40 years. "She should hear it from me before rumors reach her. She worries enough as it is." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their decision settling between them. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking time as their private world shifted. Outside the window, a gardener pushed a wheelbarrow across the lawn, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. "I won't let this hurt you," Victor said softly, his eyes reflecting years of quiet strength and consideration. "Your reputation, your position here, they're secure, no matter what." Clara straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin with quiet dignity. "We knew this might happen someday. We've talked about it enough. We'll handle it together, just as we've handled everything else." As they talked, social media exploded with reactions to Ben's article. Emma Whitcomb's original apology post was now flooded with new comments, some defending her, others calling for boycotts of Whitcomb family businesses. Local business pages were filled with debates about class privilege and responsibility, with commenters taking passionate stands on all sides. In Hartford's town square, with its historic gazebo and carefully tended flower beds, people gathered in small groups, phones in hand, sharing the latest updates. Shop owners stepped outside to join conversations with customers, and even the usually reserved librarian was engaged in animated discussion with the mailman. The story had touched a nerve, bringing up old tensions about class, privilege, and power in their small community. Some defended the Whitcombs' long history of philanthropy, while others recounted stories of dismissive treatment and high-handed business practices. That afternoon, as Clara was arranging flowers in the conservatory, filling the glass-enclosed space with the sweet scent of roses from the garden, her phone buzzed with a notification. She wiped her hands on her apron before checking it, assuming it was her mother. Instead, she found a message from Martha in the kitchen. "You need to see this." With a sense of dread, Clara opened the link. Someone had posted a photograph to Hartford's community Facebook page. Her heart stopped, and the pruning shears she held clattered to the glass-topped table. The image was grainy but clear enough. Victor and Clara in the garden 3 weeks ago, standing amid blooming roses and lavender. His hand was cupping her face tenderly, her head tilted up toward him, their posture intimate and unmistakable in the twilight. It had been a private moment, stolen between dinner preparation and his evening meeting, a moment they thought was theirs alone. The caption read, "The real story at the Hale estate. Looks like there's more than gardening happening behind those fancy gates." Already the post had dozens of comments and shares. Clara's fingers trembled as she called Victor's number. That afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed insistently while she arranged fresh peonies in the Hale estate's dining room. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. Her hands froze mid-arrangement. There on her screen was a photo she remembered all too well, from Jack and Sarah's intimate dinner party 3 weeks ago. She and Victor had stepped into the garden for air, thinking they were alone. The image caught Victor's hand tenderly cupping her cheek, their bodies close, faces tilted toward each other in the soft evening light. The anonymous account, Hartford Watcher, had posted it with the caption, "The real story at the Hale estate. Seems some people are climbing more than just the corporate ladder." Clara's stomach churned. She set down the flowers with trembling hands and headed straight to Victor's study, her shoes clicking rapidly against the hardwood floors. Victor was already standing when she entered, his own phone in hand. "I've seen it," he said quietly. "Who would—" Clara began, then stopped. The list of possible photographers was small. The dinner had been intimate, just 6 people total. Victor moved to close the study door. The angle suggests it was taken from the kitchen window. Someone must have been watching. They studied the photo together on Victor's larger desktop monitor. Comments were already piling up beneath it. Some defending their right to privacy, others speculating wildly about their relationship's timeline. "The quality is poor," Victor noted, zooming in. "But the intent is clear enough." Clara's phone rang. Her mother. She silenced it, not ready for that conversation yet. "What do we do?" Before Victor could answer, his office line lit up. The caller ID showed Martin Hale's name. Victor sighed and put it on speaker. "Martin. Victor, have you seen the photo?" Martin's voice was tense. "The board is concerned about optics, coming right after the Whitcomb incident." "I've seen it," Victor replied calmly. "And while I appreciate the board's concern, my personal life is my own business. With respect, sir, anything that affects the Foundation's reputation is board business. There are already questions about workplace dynamics and power imbalances." Clara felt her face flush. Victor's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Martin, Victor cut in, I understand the concerns, but I won't be pressured into making hasty public statements. Clara and I will handle this with the dignity it deserves. After ending the call, Victor turned to Clara. We should draft something simple, just in case we need it. Not for social media, for internal use only. Something that states the truth plainly. That we're both consenting adults in a private relationship that began well after you started working here. Clara nodded, sinking into one of the leather chairs, and that I've never received special treatment or promotions. Exactly. Victor's voice was firm. But we only share that if absolutely necessary. This is still our private life. Across town, Emma Whitcomb sat in her home office, staring at her phone. The photo of Victor and Clara filled her screen. Her fingers had already typed out a sarcastic comment. Guess some people will do anything to get ahead. But something stopped her from hitting post. The sick feeling in her stomach intensified as she remembered Clara's face at the garden party, the quiet dignity with which she'd walked away. Emma's thumb hovered over the delete button. What am I doing? She whispered to herself. With a quick motion, she erased the comment. Her own public apology from yesterday suddenly felt hollow, all carefully chosen words with no real understanding behind them. Back at the Hale estate, Victor and Clara had just finished drafting their potential statement when his email chimed. It was a calendar invite from the board secretary. Urgent board. Meeting tomorrow. AM topic: recent events and foundation image. In-person attendance required Victor's jaw tightened as he read it. Clara stood behind his chair, her hand resting on his shoulder. They can't force you out, she said softly. You've built this foundation from nothing. No, Victor agreed. They can't force me out, but they can make things very uncomfortable. He covered her hand with his own. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Clara nodded, though her heart raced at the thought of tomorrow's meeting. The photo was still spreading across social media, gathering comments and shares. Their private world was being pulled into the harsh light of public scrutiny, and there was nothing they could do but stand their ground and wait. Victor's phone buzzed again. More messages from board members, each one carrying thinly veiled concerns about reputation and appropriate behavior. He set the phone face down on his desk, refusing to engage further tonight. Should we cancel dinner with your mother this weekend? He asked Clara. She shook her head. No, she deserves to hear everything from us directly, and I won't start hiding now. As evening approached, they remained in Victor's study, working side by side in comfortable silence. The photo continued its journey through Hartford's social circles, but in that room, they found a moment of peace, even as tomorrow's calendar invite loomed on Victor's screen, marking the beginning of what they both knew would be a challenging battle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hale Enterprises boardroom as Victor straightened his tie. The familiar space felt different today, more like an arena than a meeting room. Around the polished oak table, board members shifted in their leather chairs, avoiding eye contact. Gordon Ames cleared his throat. Let's address the elephant in the room. He slid his tablet forward, displaying the viral photo of Victor and Clara. Our donors are asking questions, Victor. Difficult ones. My personal life isn't up for discussion, Victor said evenly, though his fingers tightened on his armrest. When it affects the Foundation's reputation, it becomes our concern, Gordon countered. The timing couldn't be worse. Right after the Whitcomb incident. The optics are terrible. Martha Chen, another director, nodded. We've already had 3 major donors express discomfort. Discomfort. Victor's voice was sharp. About 2 consenting adults in a private relationship? Gordon leaned forward. About the appearance of impropriety. About potential favoritism. about whether this foundation is being run professionally. He paused. The Anderson Grant Committee is particularly concerned. The Anderson Grant, $5 million earmarked for community programs. Victor felt the weight of it settle in his chest. What exactly are you suggesting? Victor asked, though he already knew. Distance yourself from the situation. Put Miss Brooks on. Paid leave until this blows over. We can craft a statement about maintaining professional boundaries and protecting the Foundation's mission. Victor stood slowly, placing both palms on the table. You want me to sacrifice Clara's dignity to protect donor relationships? I want you to protect the programs you've built, Gordon said. The after-school centers, the job training initiatives, the health clinic, all of it depends on donor confidence. He shuffled some papers. If you won't consider it, we may need to call a confidence vote. The threat hung in the air. Victor looked around the table at faces he'd known for years. Some wouldn't meet his eyes. Others looked genuinely pained. Let me be clear, Victor said quietly. I won't participate in using Clara's privacy as a bargaining chip. If transparency is needed, let's be transparent about our programs, our impact, our financial stewardship. But I won't throw a valued employee, or anyone else, under the bus to appease donors. Then you leave us no choice, Gordon said. We'll freeze all discretionary funding pending review, including the Anderson Grant application. Victor felt ice in his veins. Those funds meant everything to the communities they served, but using that as leverage against Clara. He straightened his jacket. If that's your decision, so be it. But remember, those programs serve real people. Think carefully about who really pays the price for these power plays. He gathered his papers. Meeting adjourned. In his office, Victor's hands shook slightly as he dialed Clara's number. She answered on the first ring. How bad? She asked. He explained the situation, trying to keep his voice steady. They're using the Anderson Grant as leverage. There was a long pause. Maybe I should step away for a while, just until things calm down. I can't let you lose everything you've built because of me. No. His voice was firm. That's exactly what they want, to make this your fault somehow. It's not. This is about power and control, and I won't let them use you as a scapegoat. But the programs, we'll find another way, I promise. After they hung up, Victor stood at his office window, looking out over Hartford. The town spread below him, a patchwork of neighborhoods where people depended on the Foundation's support. The weight of choice settled heavy on his shoulders, but somehow the burden felt right. Necessary. Across town, Emma Whitcomb paced her living room, phone in hand. She'd been following the Foundation's drama through her father's business connections. The board's pressure on Victor, the threatened funding. It all felt sickeningly familiar. The same kind of pressure that had made her lash out at Clara in the first place. She grabbed her keys. This had gone far enough. When she pulled up to the Hale Foundation building that afternoon, her hands were sweating. The security guard recognized her. Everyone knew the Whitcombs and waved her through. In the elevator, she rehearsed what she would say, though the words felt inadequate. The doors opened to the main office floor. Through the glass walls, she could see Clara at her desk, head bent over paperwork. Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. It was time to start making things right. Emma sat in her car outside the Hale Estates gates, crumpling another attempt at writing a note. 3 wadded papers already littered her passenger seat, each one a failed attempt to capture the right tone between apologetic and sincere. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the intricate iron bars of the gate, painting stripe-like patterns across her dashboard. The security booth stood empty, except for a stern-faced guard with salt-and-pepper hair and an unmovable expression who had already turned her away twice that day. Miss Whitcomb, I understand your situation, but I have strict instructions from the family," he'd said firmly, arms crossed over his crisp uniform. "No visitors without prior approval." Now she smoothed out a fresh sheet of paper against her steering wheel, feeling the texture beneath her fingertips. Her pen hovered uncertainly for several seconds, then began to move across the page with determined strokes. "Clara, I know words aren't enough right now, but I need to tell you in person how deeply sorry I am. What I did was completely inexcusable. Please give me a chance to make this right. Emma." She read it over twice, folded it carefully along precise creases, and stepped out of her car. The late afternoon breeze ruffled her hair as she approached the guard, who accepted the note with a curt nod, his expression softening just slightly at her evident distress. "I'll make sure she gets it," he promised, slipping the note into his pocket. Later that evening, the St. Mark's community room hummed with the quiet conversation and the comforting clinking of dishes being arranged. Maya Brooks moved between the folding tables with practiced grace, adjusting crooked tablecloths and greeting neighbors with warm, enveloping hugs that spoke of decades of shared history. The rich, mouth-watering smell of home-cooked food filled every corner of the space. Mrs. Johnson's famous 3-cheese mac and cheese with its perfect golden crust, Mr. Rivera's flaky empanadas stuffed with spiced meat, and Maya's own sweet potato pie that everyone swore could heal a broken heart. Clara stood near the wall, picking listlessly at a paper plate filled with food she'd barely touched. Her shoulders were hunched slightly, as if trying to make herself smaller in the room. "I didn't want to come tonight," she murmured to Maya when the older woman approached. "Everybody's been looking at me with those pitying eyes." "Child, that's exactly why you needed to be here," Maya replied, squeezing her arm with weathered fingers that held surprising strength. "Community holds us up when others try to knock us down. These people aren't pitying you. They're standing with you." The door opened with a slight creak, and conversation stuttered to an awkward halt like a record player unplugged mid-song. Emma Whitcomb stood frozen in the doorway, clutching a store-bought cake in a clear plastic container and wearing an expression of nervous determination that looked foreign on her normally confident face. "I'm sorry to intrude on your gathering," she said, her voice smaller and less polished than usual. "I know I wasn't invited, but I needed to be here tonight." Maya stepped forward deliberately, placing herself between Emma and Clara, her face carefully neutral but her eyes watchful. "Miss Whitcomb, this is a neighborhood gathering. Our neighborhood." "I know." Emma's hands tightened visibly on the cake box, knuckles whitening against the plastic. "That's exactly why I came. I need to apologize. To everyone here." The room remained uncomfortably silent as Emma placed the cake on a nearby table and turned to face the gathering. Clara's back stiffened like a rod, but Maya's protective hand found her shoulder, grounding her with a gentle squeeze. "What I said at the garden party was horrible and completely unforgivable," Emma began, her gaze sweeping across the room before settling briefly on Clara. "It wasn't just cruel to Clara. It was an insult to this whole community and everything you stand for. I've been trying to apologize online, through what I thought were proper channels, but—" She swallowed hard, her throat visibly working. "That's not enough. I needed to come here, to face the people I've hurt, directly and honestly." Mrs. Johnson, a retired schoolteacher known for her no-nonsense approach, crossed her arms over her floral blouse. "Pretty words, girl. But what about actions? What are you planning to do about this mess you've made?" Emma nodded, accepting the challenge in the older woman's tone. "You're absolutely right. Words are easy. I don't know yet exactly how to make this right, but I'm here to listen, to learn what that might look like from the people most affected." A teenager in the corner, Jasmine from the youth center with her bright beaded braids, snapped a quick photo with her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Within minutes, it would be circulating on Twitter. Emma Whitcomb, looking decidedly unpressed in simple jeans and a sweater, standing before a crowd of unsmiling faces in the community center. Some neighbors nodded slowly, cautious approval in their expressions. Others turned away, unconvinced by her presence. Mr. Rivera, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners, stepped forward and offered Emma a plate of his homemade empanadas, a small gesture of hospitality that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "Your daddy's company rezoned half this neighborhood 10 years ago," Mrs. Thompson said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tentative peace. She stood up from her chair, leaning on her cane. Pushed out dozens of families that had been here for generations, young couples with babies, elders who died heartbroken after moving. That hurt ain't gone away either. Emma felt the floor shift under her feet, as though the ground itself was unstable. The high color in her cheeks drained away. I didn't know about that. No one ever told me." "Course you didn't," Maya said, not unkindly but with a firmness that demanded attention. "But maybe it's time you learned what happens in the shadows of those fancy developments your family puts their name on." Clara watched the exchange silently from her corner, her face carefully composed into an unreadable mask. When Emma's searching eyes finally found hers across the room, she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the effort. A starting point. The gathering gradually resumed its rhythm, though tension lingered in the air like a faint electrical charge. Emma stayed for an hour, listening more than talking, taking mental notes of conversations happening around her. She noticed how people spoke to each other with an easy familiarity she'd never known in her social circles, how laughter flowed naturally, how arguments were settled with teasing jabs rather than icy silence. When she finally left, her mind was spinning with Mrs. Thompson's words about rezoning and displacement. In the quiet privacy of her car, she pulled out her phone and opened a new document with trembling fingers. At the top, she typed decisively, "Whitcomb Development Corp. Historical Impact Research." Her fingers paused over the keyboard as she considered where to begin unraveling this history she'd never questioned. The county archives? Old newspaper records? Her father's closely guarded files? The mobile screen lit up with a cascade of notifications. Jasmine's photo was gaining traction online, accompanied by wildly varied comments about performative activism versus genuine attempts at accountability. Emma turned off her phone with a decisive click. For once, the online chatter could wait. She had real work to do, work that might actually matter. Emma's footsteps echoed across the dark wood floors of her family's private library. Morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. She'd been in here thousands of times, but today felt different. The leather-bound volumes and carefully preserved documents seemed to watch her, holding secrets she'd never thought to question. She pulled out box after box of archived papers, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted yellowed documents, business contracts, property deeds, city council minutes from the 1950s. The familiar Whitcomb Company letterhead appeared again and again. "Development Initiative for Urban Renewal," one header proclaimed. Emma's eyes narrowed as she read further. The language was careful, measured, full of phrases like neighborhood improvement and modernization efforts. But between the lines, a darker story emerged. Her grandfather's signature appeared at the bottom of several documents. She recognized his bold strokes from the oil portrait hanging in the main hall. The man who'd built the company into what it was today. The man her father spoke of with such reverence. "This can't be right," she whispered, spreading out maps that showed the changing boundaries of neighborhoods over time. One area, marked in red, had been completely transformed. The names of previous property owners filled page after page. Johnson, Washington, Brooks. Emma's hand froze. Brooks like Clara and Maya? Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Coming for dinner tonight?" She couldn't face him. Not yet. Not until she knew more. "Working late." She typed back. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the library floor, Emma sat surrounded by evidence she couldn't deny. Her family's wealth, her comfortable life, it was built on more than just smart business decisions. Day 2. County Records Office. The County Records Office smelled of old paper and industrial carpet cleaner. Emma signed in at 8 o'clock sharp, earning a surprised look from the clerk. She'd never been here before. "Property records from 1950 to 1960, please," she requested, focusing on the Oak Grove district. She didn't notice Ben Carter at first. The journalist sat 3 tables away, poring over his own stack of documents. It wasn't until she heard him mutter something under his breath that she looked up and their eyes met. Ben's expression shifted from surprise to professional interest. "Miss Whitcomb, doing some research?" "Yes." Emma's voice was tight. "And you?" "Following up on some historical context." He paused. "About displacement patterns in Oak Grove." Emma's hands clenched beneath the table. "Found anything interesting?" "Actually, yes." Ben's tone was careful, measured. "There seems to be a pattern of property transfers during the urban renewal period. Lots of families selling below market value, right before rezoning dramatically increased property values." "They were pressured to sell," Emma said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ben nodded slowly. "The timing is remarkable, and the company that benefited most from the rezoning was Whitcomb Development." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "I know. I found the internal memos this morning." Hours passed as Emma dug deeper. Council minutes revealed heated community protests. Newspaper clippings showed her grandfather cutting ribbons at new developments while displaced families moved out. One photo showed a young Maya Brooks standing with her parents outside their former home. The caption read, "Local family relocates as urban renewal project advances." By late afternoon, Emma's eyes burned from reading and her chest felt tight. The evidence was overwhelming. Her family's company hadn't just benefited from systemic racism, they'd actively participated in it. She gathered her notes with shaking hands. Ben watched her from across the room. "Miss Whitcomb," he called softly as she headed for the door. "What will you do with this information?" Emma turned back. "The truth needs to come out, all of it." That evening, Emma sat in her car outside the records office, staring at her phone. Her father's number glowed on the screen. She pressed dial. "Emmy, missed you at dinner last night." "Dad!" Her voice was steel. "We need to talk about Oak Grove, about what Grandpa did, what our family did." Silence stretched across the line. "That was a different time, Emmy. Business decisions." "Don't." Emma's fingers gripped the steering wheel. "Don't you dare make excuses. I've seen the documents, all of them." "This is ancient history. Why dig it up now?" "Because it's not ancient history to the families who lost their homes, to people like Clara and Maya Brooks." Emma took a deep breath. "I'm coming over tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about this. Really talk. And then we're going to figure out how to make it right." She ended the call before he could respond. Through her windshield, she watched the sun setting behind the county building, its walls still holding countless stories of justice denied. Tomorrow she would face her father. Tonight she sat with the weight of truth, letting it settle into her bones. Morning sunlight streamed through the study's tall windows, catching dust motes that danced above leather-bound books and family photographs. Emma stood before her father's desk, a folder of documents clutched in her hands. Reginald Whitcomb sat in his high-backed chair, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. "Daddy, please look at these." Emma spread the papers across his desk. "These aren't just business decisions. These were people's homes." Reginald adjusted his reading glasses, barely glancing at the documents. "Emmy, you have to understand the times. The city needed development, modernization." "Stop!" Emma's voice shook. "I found the memos. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. The company waited until property values dropped, then swooped in. It was legal. All of it." Reginald's jaw tightened. "Your grandfather created thousands of jobs, built this town into something better." "Better for who?" Emma slapped her palm on a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Look at these families, Dad. Really look at them. The Brooks family, Clara's grandparents, they lost everything." Reginald stood up, pacing behind his desk. "We paid fair market value. After helping drive those values down." Emma's voice rose. "The zoning changes, the urban renewal plans, it was all coordinated. You can't tell me you didn't know." Her father stopped at the window, hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment he said nothing. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. "Of course I knew. I was fresh out of business school, working my first summer at the company. Your grandfather said we were building the future." "At what cost?" "Emmy." He turned to face her. "Business isn't black and white. Sometimes progress means—" "Don't you dare call it progress." Emma's eyes burned. "Progress would have included everyone. This was profit over people, and you know it." Reginald sank back into his chair. "What do you want from me? An apology? It was 50 years ago. I want you to acknowledge the harm, to help make it right." "Make it right?" He laughed bitterly. "How? We can't turn back time." "No, but we can face the truth. We can support the communities we hurt." Emma's voice softened. "Dad, this isn't just about the past. It's about who we choose to be now." Her father picked up one of the documents, studying it with tired eyes. "Your grandfather built something lasting. Whatever his methods, he created opportunities. For some people," Emma said quietly, "while destroying opportunities for others." Reginald set the paper down, rubbing his temples. "It was business, Emmy. Just business." "That's not good enough anymore, Dad." That evening, Emma pushed her dinner around her plate, appetite gone. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Just business. How many times had that phrase covered up real human cost? She pulled out the old Whitcomb development brochure she'd found in the archives. Glossy photos showed smiling white families in front of new homes. "Building tomorrow's community today," the headline proclaimed. But whose tomorrow? Whose community? Sleep wouldn't come. At midnight, Emma sat up in bed, reached for her phone, and dialed Ben's number before she could change her mind. "Hello?" His voice was groggy. "I want to publish the documents," Emma said without preamble. "All of them. The memos, the zoning records, everything." There was a long pause. "That's a big step. Are you sure? The truth needs to come out. From our side this time. Your father won't like it. I know." Emma's hand tightened on the phone. "But maybe that's exactly why it needs to happen. Let me think about how to approach this." Ben said carefully. "We'll need to verify everything, get comments from all sides. Of course, I can't keep this quiet. Not anymore." After hanging up, Emma pulled out her laptop and opened the Neighborhood Association website. The next potluck was in 3 days. Her cursor hovered over the RSVP button. This time she wouldn't go to apologize. She would go to listen. Really listen to the stories, the pain, the history she'd never bothered to learn before. She clicked yes. The screen confirmed her response, and Emma sat back, exhausted but certain. Words weren't enough anymore. The true work, the hard work, was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Hale Estate's main conference room. Victor stood at the head of the table, his usual calm presence carrying an extra weight today. Around him, 30 staff members shifted in their seats, their worried whispers falling silent as he cleared his throat. "I know there have been rumors," Victor began, his deep voice steady. "About pressure from the board, about possible changes. I want to be direct with you all." He paused, making eye contact with various staff members, gardeners, housekeepers, kitchen staff, people who had served the estate faithfully for years. "The board has expressed concerns about recent events. They're pushing for changes that I don't agree with." His hands rested firmly on the table. "But I want you all to know this. No one, and I mean no one, will lose their job over this situation." Sarah, who had worked in the kitchen for 20 years, spoke up. "But Mr. Hale, we've heard about the donors threatening to pull out." "Let them," Victor replied firmly. "This estate has weathered harder times. We have reserves." "What about the community programs?" asked James from maintenance. "The after-school tutoring? The job training?" Victor's expression softened. "Those are my primary concern. We'll find a way to protect them, even if it means making other sacrifices." Some staff members exchanged worried glances, while others sat straighter, their faces set with determination. Maria, the head housekeeper, stood up. "Mr. Hale, we stand with you," she declared, "and with Clara." Later that afternoon, the community center hummed with activity as people arrived for the neighborhood potluck. The long tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes, Maya's famous sweet potato pie, Mrs. Johnson's mac and cheese, and dozens of other family recipes that carried their own histories. Emma sat quietly in a corner, noting how different this felt from her usual charity events. Here, there was no pretense, no performance, just real people sharing real food and real stories. Maya stood at the front of the room, her grey hair gleaming in the fluorescent light. "Before we eat," she began, her voice carrying natural authority, "we need to talk about what's happening in our community, about history that keeps repeating itself." The room fell silent. Clara sat near her mother, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Displacement isn't just a word in a history book," Maya continued. "It's what happened to my parents, to Clara's family, to dozens of families who once called this neighborhood home." Emma felt the weight of eyes on her, but she kept her gaze steady, forcing herself to stay present with the discomfort. Clara stood slowly, her voice soft but clear. "My Uncle James lived in the old neighborhood. He had an auto repair shop there, built it himself. When the rezoning happened, they gave him 2 weeks to clear out." She swallowed hard. He'd saved for 20 years to buy that property, but suddenly the codes changed, the taxes went up, and then came the offers he couldn't refuse because he couldn't afford to stay. He died 3 years later. Mama says it was a broken heart as much as anything else. The room was absolutely still. Emma felt tears pricking at her eyes, thinking of the cold business memos she'd read, the clinical language that had masked such human pain. Ben Carter sat nearby, taking quiet notes. He looked up as his phone buzzed with a message. After reading it, he cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt," he said, "but I just received confirmation about something. The Riverside Foundation is threatening to withdraw their $1 million grant for the Hale Enterprise community programs unless, in their words, recent controversies are resolved." A murmur of distress rippled through the room. The Riverside grant funded everything from the food bank to the senior center's meal delivery program. "They can't do that," someone protested. "They can," Maya said grimly. Money always talks. That's how it worked 50 years ago. That's how it works now. Back at the Hale estate that evening, Victor sat in his study, the lamp casting a warm glow over his desk. His fingers moved steadily over his laptop keyboard as he composed his statement. After careful consideration, I have decided to step down as CEO of Hale Enterprises, effective immediately. This decision is entirely my own and stems from my belief that no individual's position should jeopardize programs that serve our community's most vulnerable members. The truth is simple. I have found love with someone who works on my staff. While this relationship has violated no company policies, others have chosen to weaponize it against the very community programs that define Hale Enterprises' mission. I refuse to let that happen. My resignation will ensure these essential programs continue uninterrupted. The food bank, after-school programs, job training initiatives, and senior services must survive. They are not bargaining chips in anyone's game of power and propriety. To our staff, your jobs are secure. To our community partners, your programs will continue. And to Clara Brooks, you deserve to be loved openly and honestly, without fear or shame. I hope my departure allows you that freedom. Victor's finger hovered over the send button as the grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight. The morning sun filtered through the study windows as Victor stared at the resignation letter on his desk. His coffee had gone cold, untouched. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. Maya arrived first, settling into one of the leather chairs with the quiet dignity that seemed woven into her very being. Clara followed moments later, her face tight with worry. The board thinks they have leverage, Victor said, running a hand through his silver hair. If I stay, they'll freeze the funding. If I go... He spread his hands helplessly. You're thinking about your legacy, Clara said softly. About all the good you could still do from that office. Maya nodded slowly. Power can do good things, but it can also trap us into thinking we're the only ones who can do those good things. Victor stood and paced to the window. Below, the garden staff was preparing the spring beds, work that would continue with or without him. I've spent 20 years building these programs, the food bank, the job training center, the youth mentorship. And they're bigger than you now, Clara said, her voice gentle but firm. They belong to the community. Your ego doesn't need to protect them anymore. Victor turned, startled by her directness. She's right, Maya added. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is step aside and let the truth speak for itself. Clara crossed to Victor, taking his hand. The programs will survive because they matter to people, because they're needed, not because of who sits in the CEO's chair. Victor squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her certainty. You're both right. I've been holding on too tight, thinking I was the guardian when I should have been the gardener. By evening, the press release was ready. Victor read it one final time before hitting send. Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Hale Enterprises. This decision comes from a place of deep reflection about power, responsibility, and dignity. Recent attempts to leverage our community programs against personal relationships have made it clear that my continued leadership could jeopardize services vital to our neighbors' well-being. I refuse to allow that. These programs must continue uncompromised by power plays or personal vendettas. The media response was swift and varied. Some outlets praised Victor's principled stand, while others dug for scandal. Business magazines debated the financial implications, while local papers focused on the community impact. In her home office, Emma watched the coverage with a mixture of emotions: relief that the situation had found resolution, but sorrow that it had required such sacrifice. She recognized now how power worked, how it could force good people into impossible choices. Ben Carter's latest article took a different angle than his earlier coverage. In an era where corporate leaders often prioritize profit over principle, Victor Hale's resignation forces us to examine the true cost of moral leadership. His choice to step down rather than allow community programs to be used as leverage raises questions about power, accountability, and the price of dignity. Clara read the article in bed that night, proud tears sliding down her cheeks. Victor's sacrifice hurt, deeply and personally, but his courage filled her with fierce joy. He had chosen truth over power, love over position. The week that followed tested everyone. Major donors began withdrawing, sending shockwaves through the community programs. The food bank scrambled to maintain services. The job training center reduced its hours. The senior meal delivery program started a desperate fundraising campaign. But something else happened too. Small donations began trickling in from neighborhood residents. Local businesses offered space for programs. Volunteer applications doubled, then tripled. Maya organized emergency meetings in church basements and community centers. "We've survived worse," she reminded worried neighbors. "We know how to hold each other up." By week's end, the landscape had shifted. Some programs were smaller, others relocated, but none had closed. The community had rallied, refusing to let good work die. In his home office, Victor watched these developments with bittersweet pride. He had lost his position, but kept his principles. The cost was high, but as Clara had said, dignity was worth the price. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the Belvedere Community Center's main office as Sarah, the program coordinator, hung up the phone. Her hands shook as she turned to face the small group gathered around her desk. "They've frozen the Harriman Foundation grant," she said, her voice cracking. "Pending what they're calling board reorganization and review." Clara felt the air leave her lungs. The Harriman grant funded nearly half of the center's educational programs and senior services. Without it, they'd have to cut the after-school tutoring that helped working parents. The daily meals that kept local seniors healthy and connected would be at risk, too. Parents waiting in the hallway began whispering anxiously. Mrs. Rodriguez, who relied on the after-school program for her 3 kids while she worked double shifts, pressed her hand to her mouth. Mr. Chen, who volunteered with the senior meal delivery program, shook his head in dismay. "How long can we keep things running?" Maya asked, her calm voice cutting through the panic. Sarah shuffled through some papers. "Maybe 3 weeks with our current reserves. We're looking at having to cut programs by 60% unless we find alternative funding." Clara's stomach churned with guilt. If she hadn't gotten involved with Victor, if their relationship hadn't become public and forced his resignation, would the center still have its funding? She slipped out of the office and into the empty classroom next door, pressing her forehead against the cool window glass. Maya found her there minutes later. "This isn't your fault, child." "Isn't it?" Clara turned, tears threatening. "If Victor and I had been more careful, stop right there." Maya's voice was firm but gentle. "This isn't about you and Victor. This is about institutions that make community services dependent on the whims of wealthy donors. That's the real problem, not love between 2 good people." Clara wiped her eyes. "But the children, the seniors, will be taken care of," Maya assured her, "because that's what community means. We don't let each other fall." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Emma Whitcomb stood in the doorway, arms full of aluminum foil-covered dishes, a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. "I brought dinner for the senior program," she said, somewhat awkwardly. "And this." She pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to Sarah. Inside was a check that made the program coordinator gasp. "It's not enough to replace the grant," Emma said quickly. "But it might help bridge the gap while we figure something out." Clara studied Emma's face, looking for any trace of the superiority she'd shown at the garden party. Instead, she saw only genuine concern and determination. "We need to call a town meeting," Emma continued. "Pool our resources, get creative with solutions. The senior center has extra space we could use for after-school programs. The library might partner on tutoring. Local restaurants might help with meals." "Why are you doing this?" Clara asked quietly. Emma met her gaze steadily. "Because it's right. Because this community deserves better than to have its services held hostage by institutional politics. Because—" She paused. "I'm trying to be better than my family's history." Maya nodded approvingly. "When were you thinking for this town meeting?" "Sunday afternoon. That gives us time to spread the word, get key stakeholders there." Emma pulled out her phone. "I've already talked to Reverend Jackson about using the church hall. It's bigger than the center's meeting room." Clara felt something shift inside her. Not quite trust, but a cautious appreciation for Emma's concrete actions. This wasn't just words or performative guilt. This was someone rolling up their sleeves to help. Parents and volunteers began clustering around Emma's phone as she created a group chat for coordinating efforts. Mrs. Rodriguez offered her sister's catering kitchen for meal prep. Mr. Chen mentioned his contacts with the local Chinese Community Association. A high school teacher volunteered to organize a rotation of student tutors for after-school hours. Sarah started a spreadsheet tracking offers of help: space, supplies, volunteer hours, small donations. The list grew steadily as word spread through the neighborhood. By late afternoon, the center's lobby had become an impromptu command center, with people dropping in to add their names to volunteer lists or donate what they could. "See?" Maya squeezed Clara's hand. "Community holds community. Always has. Always will." Clara watched Emma working the phones, her designer blazer draped over a chair as she coordinated with local businesses and civic groups. The woman who had once told her to go back where she belonged was now fighting to protect the very services that made this community home for so many. "Sunday at 3:00, Emma announced finally. "Reverend Jackson will open the church hall at 2 for setup. We'll need help with chairs, childcare during the meeting, and light refreshments." Hands shot up immediately as people volunteered. Someone started a sign-up sheet. Another person created flyers to distribute. The energy in the room had transformed from fear to purpose. Clara felt Maya's knowing look. "What?" she asked. "Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways," Maya said softly, "for everyone involved." As the afternoon wound down, Clara found herself helping Emma load empty casserole dishes back into her car. "Thank you," Clara said simply, "for doing something real." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "See you Sunday?" "Yes," Clara replied. "I'll be there." They watched as volunteers dispersed, carrying flyers and determination with them. The town hall was just a beginning, but it was something solid to hold on to, proof that when institutions failed, community could still stand strong. The municipal auditorium buzzed with voices as people filed in, filling rows of metal folding chairs. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Local TV crews set up cameras near the walls while reporters from the county paper scribbled in notepads. Ben Carter stood at the podium, shuffling papers and checking his microphone. "Testing 1, 2." His voice echoed through the space. He scanned the crowd. Non-profit directors in business casual, elderly residents with worried faces, parents still in work uniforms, teenagers wearing community center t-shirts. Emma sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Maya settled into a chair nearby, nodding at familiar faces. Clara slipped in quietly and took a seat near the middle, where Victor would have sat if he were there in person. At exactly 3:00, Ben called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming today. We're here to address the funding crisis facing our community programs and to find solutions together. He introduced Emma first. She walked to the podium, her prepared statement trembling slightly in her hands. The room fell silent. "My name is Emma Whitcomb," she began, voice steady despite her nerves. "6 generations of my family have lived in this town. For years, we've presented ourselves as community leaders and benefactors, but there's a darker truth we need to acknowledge." She detailed the mid-century zoning changes, the displacement of black families, the profits that built her family's fortune. "My recent behavior at the garden party wasn't just a personal failing. It was the ugly echo of institutional racism that my family helped create and maintain." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma pressed on. "Words aren't enough. Today I'm announcing the creation of a $1 million seed fund for community programs and reparative projects. This fund will have complete public oversight. I'm just the donor. The community will decide how it's used." The room erupted in surprised conversation. Maya's eyebrows rose appreciatively. Ben stepped up next. "We also have a video message from Victor Hale." The projector hummed to life. Victor's face appeared on screen, dignified despite obvious strain. "I stepped down as CEO to protect essential community services from being used as leverage," he said clearly. "My relationship with Clara Brooks has been characterized as a scandal, but the only scandal here is how vulnerable our community programs are to institutional pressure." He spoke Clara's name with such obvious respect and affection that several people turned to look at her. She sat straight-backed, chin lifted. "The real story," Victor continued, "isn't about private relationships, it's about public responsibility, about choosing dignity over power, about refusing to let good programs die because of boardroom politics." As the video ended, Ben cleared his throat. "There's something else the community needs to know." He gestured to a young woman in a grey suit who rose nervously. "My name is Jessica Torres. I'm an assistant to the board of directors," she said. 2 weeks ago, I overheard Gordon Ames arranging payment to a PR consultant named Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb was hired to create anonymous social media accounts and leak photos of Mr. Hale and Ms. Brooks. The room erupted. "That's disgusting!" someone shouted. "Using people's lives as weapons." Ben held up a file. "I have copies of emails between Mr. Ames and the consultant, as well as payment records. This wasn't accidental exposure. It was a deliberate attempt to force Mr. Hale out." Clara pressed her hands to her mouth. Maya reached across 2 seats to grasp her shoulder. "The board wanted control of the foundation's direction," Jessica continued. "They saw Mr. Hale's relationship with Ms. Brooks as leverage they could use." Angry voices filled the auditorium. Ben had to rap the podium several times for order. "Let's focus on solutions," he said firmly. "We need to form a steering committee to oversee both immediate program needs and long-term community investment. This committee will also have oversight of the new seed fund Ms. Whitcomb has established." People began calling out nominations. Emma's name came first, followed quickly by Maya's. Others were suggested: non-profit directors, community leaders, local business owners. "Motion to elect Emma Whitcomb and Maya Brooks as co-chairs," someone called. "Seconded." The vote was nearly unanimous. Emma and Maya exchanged long looks across the aisle, acknowledging the weight of responsibility they'd just accepted. "Clara Brooks," Maya said clearly, "should also be on this committee. Her perspective is essential." Clara stood slowly. "I appreciate the nomination," she said, "but I need some time to think about it. This has all happened very fast." The room rippled with understanding murmurs. Ben nodded. "The committee will hold its first meeting next week. Ms. Brooks, the invitation remains open." As the meeting wound down, people clustered in groups, exchanging contact information and ideas. The energy had shifted from fear to determination. Local businesses pledged support. Volunteers signed up for expanded roles. The crisis wasn't over, but the community was pulling together rather than falling apart. The steering committee would meet the following week to begin its work. For now, though, something fundamental had changed. Truth had been spoken. Manipulation had been exposed. And in its place, something more authentic was taking root. Commitment to real repair, not just surface solutions. Emma and Maya stood together reviewing sign-up sheets while Clara spoke quietly with Jessica Torres, thanking her for coming forward. Ben packed away his documents, satisfied that the real story had finally emerged. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, warming the hopeful buzz of a community finding its way forward together. The fluorescent lights of the community center's main meeting room cast a harsh glow over spreadsheets and budget papers scattered across folding tables. 1 week had passed since the town hall, and the newly formed steering committee was diving deep into the financial reality they faced. Emma rubbed her temples as she studied the numbers. The tutoring program alone needs $50,000 to stay afloat through the quarter, she said. And the senior meals program. Can't wait. Maya finished, shuffling through a stack of invoices. We've got 38 seniors who depend on those deliveries. Around the table, committee members nodded gravely. The morning sun streamed through dusty windows, highlighting worried faces. I've prepared an emergency grant proposal for the Whitcomb Foundation, Emma said, passing out folders. $100,000 with full community oversight and complete transparency on spending. Maya studied the document. This is thorough, but we need more than just Whitcomb money. The community needs to see broader support. What about a benefit gala? Suggested Robert Chen, a local business owner. Something big enough to attract serious donors, but community-focused enough to show we're all in this together. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and sat up straighter. Everyone should see this. Ben just published his follow-up story about Gordon Ames. Committee members pulled out phones and tablets, reading silently. The article was devastating in its detail. Emails between Gordon and the PR consultant, payment records, testimony from multiple sources confirming Gordon's deliberate campaign to force Victor's resignation. That manipulative snake, Maya muttered, scrolling through the evidence. Emma's face had gone pale. I knew Gordon could be ruthless, but this, using people's private lives as weapons, the board can't ignore this, said Robert. Gordon's position is untenable now. As if on cue, phones began buzzing with breaking news alerts. Gordon Ames had resigned from the Hale Enterprise Board, effective immediately. His statement cited personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. This changes the narrative completely, Maya said. Clara's been vindicated. The whole thing was just a power play. Emma nodded. Speaking of Clara, where is she? I thought she might join us today. She's taking some time, Maya replied softly. The article helps, but she's worn out from being in the spotlight. She'll let us know when she's ready to participate. The committee turned to practical matters. They set a date for the benefit gala, 3 weeks out, at the renovated historic theatre downtown. Subcommittees formed naturally. Decorations, catering, publicity, donor outreach. We need to emphasize community unity in all our messaging, Emma insisted. This isn't about charity, it's about neighbors supporting neighbors. Maya was already working her phone, texting neighborhood leaders. We'll need volunteers for setup, service, cleanup, and my church ladies can handle desserts. Nobody turns down Sister Beatrice's peach cobbler. The energy in the room shifted from worried to purposeful. Committee members moved between groups, comparing notes, coordinating tasks. Emma and Maya found themselves working in natural tandem. Emma's organizational skills complementing Maya's deep community connections. The Riverside Restaurant Association is in, Robert announced, hanging up his phone. "They'll handle the main course and staff training. All we pay for is ingredients." "Perfect," Emma said, making notes. "And the theater's donating the space. Now we just need music." Maya finished. "I know just the people. The jazz quartet from First Baptist, plus those talented kids from the high school orchestra." A local event planner volunteered her services, sketching layout ideas. The owner of a printing company offered to donate invitations and programs. A florist promised centerpieces at cost. By noon, the room buzzed with possibility rather than anxiety. The committee had a clear action plan. Emma would fast-track the Whitcomb Foundation grant, while Maya coordinated neighborhood support. The benefit gala would showcase community unity while raising crucial funds. Most importantly, they had truth on their side. Ben's reporting had exposed the manipulation behind the scandal. "We should reach out to Victor," Emma suggested quietly to Maya. "See if he'll attend the gala. His presence would mean a lot." Maya considered this. "Let me talk to Clara first. She should have a say in that decision." Emma nodded, understanding the need for sensitivity. She gathered her papers, watching the room full of people working together with such determination. It felt like real change, not just fixing a crisis, but building something stronger for the future. The morning's work had laid a foundation. Now they had 3 weeks to turn plans into reality, to prove that community bonds could overcome institutional pressure. The committee members left with assignments, deadlines, and a shared sense of purpose. Their town was coming together not just to save essential programs, but to create a new model of community support and accountability. The historic, majestic theatre buzzed with activity as the committee took measurements and planned layouts. Its restored Art Deco details would provide the perfect backdrop for an elegant community gathering. "The main floor can seat 200 for dinner," the theatre manager explained, gesturing at the space where rows of seats had been removed years ago. "Plus standing room in the mezzanine for another 50 during the program." Emma worked the phones, coordinating with local vendors. The Riverside Restaurant Association had already committed their top chefs. Morton's Flowers promised seasonal arrangements at cost. Even the high-end print shop offered to donate invitations with gold embossing. "Everything needs to be perfect," Emma insisted during the daily committee meeting. "But not flashy. We're aiming for dignity, not showing off." Maya nodded approvingly while orchestrating her own network of supporters. The Baptist church choir would perform, along with the high school jazz band. Her famous peach cobbler would anchor the dessert table, joined by other neighborhood specialties. At the Whitcomb Foundation offices, Emma established a transparent oversight committee for program funding. "Every dollar will be tracked and reported publicly," she told the board. "We need to rebuild trust." Meanwhile, Clara sat in Maya's kitchen, nervously reviewing her draft speech. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "Just speak your truth." Maya encouraged. "Your story matters." Across town, Victor worked late into the night, creating detailed proposals for supporting displaced families through housing assistance and educational programs. His notes to Clara grew shorter, but more tender. "Proud of you. Stay strong." Week 2. Storm clouds gathered as Reginald Whitcomb stormed into Emma's office. "This has gone far enough," he declared. "You're dragging our name through the mud with all this talk of historical wrongs." Emma stood her ground. "No, Dad. The truth matters, and making things right matters more than protecting our reputation." "Then do it without corporate backing," he threatened. "If that's your choice," Emma replied steadily. "But I won't stop speaking the truth." Clara struggled with her own demons, pacing Maya's living room. "If I talk about Uncle James losing his home, it makes everything so personal, so raw." "Sometimes raw truth is what people need to hear," Maya said gently. "But only if you're ready to share it." Ben's series of community profiles began running in the local paper. He highlighted volunteers, described the programs at risk, and painted a picture of neighbors helping neighbors. Comments and shares flooded social media, building momentum. The committee tracked ticket sales and donation pledges, breathing easier as numbers grew. Local businesses bought blocks of seats. Church groups organized carpools. The high school principal offered the parking lot for overflow. Week 3. Final preparations reached fever pitch. Volunteer ushers practiced their routes through the theater. The jazz band rehearsed in the balcony, sound echoing perfectly. Catering staff tested serving patterns in the renovated lobby. Clara made her decision during a quiet morning at Maya's kitchen table. "I won't speak about Uncle James," she said finally. "Not because I'm afraid, but because this isn't about past pain. It's about future healing." Maya squeezed her hand. "You'll find the right words." Emma worked late into the night, drafting and redrafting her public apology. Every word had to ring true, had to acknowledge both personal and systemic harm. No excuses, no deflections. A note arrived from Victor, hand-delivered to Clara at the community center. "Whatever happens tomorrow night, remember that dignity and truth have already won. Your strength inspires us all." The night before the gala, the committee gathered for one final review. Checklist complete, seating arranged, programs printed, donations recorded, speeches prepared. They were exhausted but hopeful. Maya looked around the circle of tired faces. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we've already shown what community really means." Emma nodded. "Together," she said simply. Clara touched the folded speech in her pocket, feeling its weight, knowing tomorrow would change things. But for now, in this moment of quiet anticipation, she felt ready. The theater stood silent in the gathering dusk, waiting for tomorrow's transformation. Across town, volunteers set out clothes for the morning, donors prepared checks, and neighbors planned to gather. The stage was set for something larger than a fundraiser, a moment of community reckoning and repair. The municipal hall glowed with warmth as neighbors filed in at 7 o'clock sharp. White tablecloths draped round tables where crystal water glasses caught the soft lighting. Simple flower arrangements of local blooms decorated each table. Nothing fancy, just honest beauty. Emma stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded her prepared statement. The room fell silent. She took a deep breath and began. "A few months ago I spoke cruel words that revealed not just my own prejudice, but generations of harm done by my family. Tonight isn't about defending those actions or seeking quick forgiveness. It's about concrete steps toward repair." She detailed the Whitcomb Foundation's commitment to housing assistance, educational programs, and community oversight of funds. Her voice grew stronger as she outlined specific actions rather than just words. "I cannot undo the past, but I can work alongside you to build a better future. Thank you for giving me the chance to learn and to change." The applause started slowly, scattered at first, then building. Some faces remained skeptical, others nodded with cautious approval. Maya caught Emma's eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. Clara rose next, smoothing her deep blue dress as she approached the microphone. The room stilled completely. Her quiet presence commanded attention without demanding it. "When I was told to go back where I belong, it struck a deeper chord than simple rudeness," she began. "It echoed decades of displacement, of being told we don't belong in spaces we helped build." Her voice remained steady, dignified. "But belonging is not a place you command from the top. It is a place you build with your hands, with casseroles brought to sick neighbors, with tutoring sessions for struggling students, with rides given to elderly friends who can no longer drive." She gestured to the gathered faces. "This room tonight, this is belonging. Not because anyone granted it, but because we create it together, day by day. The silence held for a breathless moment before eruption into sustained applause. Several people rose to their feet, including Emma, whose eyes shone with tears. As the evening progressed, local restaurant owners served elegant comfort food at cost. The high school jazz band played softly as volunteers circulated with donation cards. Ben moved through the crowd, notebook in hand, capturing the mood of reconciliation and resolve. Near 9 o'clock, a subtle shift rippled through the room as Victor slipped in through the side door. He stood at the back, hands clasped behind him, smiling gently as he watched Clara speaking with a group of after-school program parents. The fundraising total appeared on the screen, well above their goal. Cheers erupted, followed by several local business owners standing to pledge ongoing support. The programs would not just survive, they would expand. As the formal portion of the evening wound down, Clara noticed Victor's presence. Their eyes met across the room in a moment of quiet recognition. She excused herself and made her way to where Maya stood near the dessert table. "Shall we step outside for a moment?" Maya suggested, already reading Clara's mind. The three of them found a quiet spot on the lawn, away from the hall's warm glow. The spring night air carried the scent of blooming jasmine. "You were magnificent," Victor said simply, taking Clara's hand. "We're done hiding," Clara replied. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Maya wrapped her arms around them both. "About time," she said with a gentle laugh. "Love shouldn't need permission." Back inside, Emma found herself surrounded by family members of those displaced years ago. Instead of anger, they offered cautious appreciation for sustained effort over empty words. "You're listening now?" one elderly woman said. "That's a start." As the crowd thinned, Emma approached Clara with a small potted oak sapling. "Would you help me plant this? By the community center?" They walked together in the spring evening, finding the spot already prepared. Taking turns with the shovel, they settled the young tree into rich soil. "May it grow straight and strong," Clara said. "With deep roots," Emma added. They stood back, looking at the small tree with its leaves silvered by moonlight. It wasn't an ending, but a beginning, like all true growth, requiring patience, care, and time. Around them, volunteers cleaned up from the gala, cars pulled away carrying tired but hopeful passengers, and the municipal hall's lights dimmed one by one. The sapling stood as a quiet promise in the darkness, its leaves stirring in the gentle night breeze. http://docs.google.com document dd1i2ppp. Ugo Beasvent X Syed 2SQ DUWX5GX Verivo O KQDUW8 Edit USPHO sharing. 1 month after the gala, the afternoon sun warmed the freshly painted sign reading The Belonging Project above the renovated community center. Children darted between garden beds filled with early summer vegetables, their laughter mixing with the steady hum of conversation from seniors enjoying lunch at new picnic tables. The oak sapling they'd planted after the gala had settled well, its leaves catching golden light. Beside it, neat rows of community garden plots stretched toward a playground, where kids from the after-school program were helping to hang colorful wind chimes. Emma stood at the podium, her hands steady on note cards she barely needed. "Accountability isn't a moment, it's a commitment," she said, looking out at gathered faces both familiar and new. "The Whitcomb Company's Oversight Committee ensures that our promises of restitution remain transparent and community-guided. We're here to listen and learn, not just today, but every day forward." Clara squeezed Victor's hand as they waited to cut the ribbon. He looked relaxed in casual clothes, freed from corporate constraints. Maya sat in the front row, beaming with quiet pride as she watched her community claim this space as their own. "The programs we thought we might lose have grown stronger," Emma continued, Not because of top-down rescue, but because neighbors came together. We've learned that belonging isn't given. It's built daily through small acts of care and commitment. The ribbon cutting was simple and joyful. Clara and Victor stood together openly, no longer hiding their relationship, while camera flashes caught the moment. Maya led the applause that rippled through the crowd. News of Gordon's resignation and the fallout from his exposed manipulation had faded into yesterday's headlines. The restructured Hale Enterprises board now included 3 community members, their voices carrying equal weight in decisions. The Whitcomb Company's restitution committee, chaired by a respected local pastor, had already approved its first round of housing assistance grants. Later that afternoon, Clara taught a children's gardening class, showing small hands how to transplant seedlings. "Gentle now," she demonstrated, easing a tomato plant into rich soil. "Everything needs time and care to grow strong roots." Emma worked nearby, helping senior citizens arrange chairs for their weekly book club. She'd been attending restitution study groups twice monthly, learning about systematic repair from community leaders across the country. The bruised defensiveness that once armored her had softened into something more genuine, a willingness to listen and learn. Victor had found his own path forward, establishing a modest but stable fund for vulnerable programs, ensuring they'd never again depend on institutional whims. He worked from a small office downtown, advising other philanthropies on community-centered approaches. As evening approached, the celebration wound down naturally. Volunteers packed away folding chairs while children helped clean up craft supplies. Clara and Victor walked home together, their fingers linked loosely, discussing dinner plans with the comfortable ease of an established couple. In their kitchen, Clara chopped vegetables while Victor prepared fish, moving around each other in a practiced dance. The window above their sink looked out on the neighborhood where porch lights were beginning to flicker on. "Sometimes the simplest moments feel the most remarkable," Clara said, watching a family walk past with their dog. "Just being able to stand here, no hiding, no pressure." Victor kissed her temple as he reached past for herbs, the best kind of ordinary. Back at the community center, Emma and Maya worked together, planting another sapling near the first oak. Their hands met in the soil as they tamped earth around tender roots. "6 months ago, I wouldn't have imagined this," Emma said, sitting back on her heels. Maya smiled, brushing dirt from her palms. "Growth surprises us that way." Victor walked over from where he'd been watching, offering them both water bottles. The 3 stood contemplating the 2 young trees as the sun began to set. 6 months later, their work continued steadily. Emma devoted herself to oversight committees and community education, her corporate skills redirected toward genuine repair. Clara expanded the center's programs, teaching and organizing with the quiet strength that had always defined her. Victor advised philanthropic boards on community-centered governance, while Maya remained the neighborhood's beating heart, hosting potlucks and keeping everyone's stories alive. The saplings grew inches taller, their leaves dancing in summer breezes, taking root in soil made richer by honest work and shared purpose.